February 17th, 2003, a security guard started his usual shift at the Diamond Center, Antwerp, Belgium. As usual, at the start of the week, he entered the building, greeted his co-workers at the reception desk, he passed through the metal detector, then he went to open the safe before the clients started coming in. But to his surprise, the place was absolutely ransacked. Open safe deposit boxes that used to contain millions of dollars were all opened and empty. But how did that happen? The problem is that this place had a reputation of being impossible to rob because it had more than 10 security layers that had to be surpassed successfully to avoid being detected, and this puzzled the investigators. First, there was a combination lock between 0 and 99 with 4 different numbers that had to be entered, so there was approximately 100 million different combinations. Then there is a unique lock that can only be opened with a footlock key that is impossible to replicate. In addition to a magnetic field sensor, a seismic sensor, another steel gate inside the vault, infrared motion detectors, heat sensors, light sensors, and of course, as you might expect, there were internal and external security cameras inside and outside the vault. So who was responsible for this robbery? And what are the skills and techniques that were used to conduct this impossible heist successfully? And how one trivial mistake will lead to the collapse of years of planning and hard work? In the year 2000, one Italian man decided to rent an office in the Diamond Center for 25,000 Belgian francs per month, posing as an Italian gem merchant. He smooth talked to the building's manager into renting an office and quickly became friends with the Antwerp Diamond District dealers, becoming a familiar and a trusted part of the local business community. No one knew that they had just welcomed one of the world's best jewel thieves into their circle, and this man was Leonardo Notarbartolo, who already had a criminal background as a robber. And the fact that they didn't do background checks on this guy is gonna be a disaster, as you will see. But the real story started one day in the summer of 2001. 1 year after renting his office, while sipping an espresso at a cafe, he was approached by a diamond dealer who invited Notarbartolo for a walk. And once they were clear of the district, he proposed an unusual request. He told him, "I want to hire you for a robbery, a big one." The agreement was straightforward. First, Notarbartolo had to answer a simple yet intriguing question. The dealer asked him in a straightforward manner, could the vault in the Antwerp Diamond Center be robbed? At first, Notarbartolo was pretty sure the answer was no, but all he had to do was bring in a proof and win 100,000 euros. This was kind of a game at first and a challenge as well. Notarbartolo had to think of an idea that would allow him to bring that proof without being detected. So, with a pen peeking out of his breast pocket, he casually walked into the Diamond District. Though it appeared to be a simple digital highlighter, the cab had a tiny digital camera which went unnoticed. And he had to do this because the district strictly prohibited photography. He started his recon at the police surveillance station, sneakily taking pictures of the officers monitoring the area. He then headed towards the Diamond Center, which is a 14-story building well guarded by its private security force. To make it even harder, access was blocked by metal turnstiles, and visitors were questioned by the guards. Luckily for Notarbartolo, being an official renter, he was also entitled to rent a safe deposit box, and he was offered an ID card that granted him free 24-hour access to the building. After breezing through the building and capturing images, he took the elevator down to the second floor underground, because there lies the Holy Grail, the vault chamber. Notarbartolo pressed a buzzer on the steel gate, and a guard upstairs glanced at the camera feed, identified him, and remotely opened the steel gate. And then Notarbartolo went through the motions of opening and closing his box and then proceeded to walk out, having all the images needed to prove his claim. 5 months later, Notarbartolo received a call. Actually, he secretly expected the dealer to return, especially after all the lengths he went to demonstrate his new discoveries. And this time, the man wanted to meet at an address outside Antwerp. Notarbartolo was reluctant, but he finally accepted. When he arrived, the dealer was waiting for him in front of an abandoned warehouse, which was suspicious to say the least. Inside stood a massive structure covered with black plastic tarps. The dealer pulled back a corner and they dug underneath. Notarbartolo couldn't believe his eyes. He was standing in the vault antechamber of the Diamond Center. Everything was the same, as far as you could tell. The dealer had made an extremely precise and an exact replica of the vault. Inside it were 3 Italians having a conversation. They stopped talking when they saw the dealer and Notarbartolo. From the looks of it, they seemed to be here for the same reason. Actually, the dealer had built a team because he was sure the heist could be done. Having an exact replica of the vault and the talent of each person, this team was about to craft a plan, assigning a specific task to each member. The leader of the team was of course Leonardo Notarbartolo, a talented and a charismatic thief since his youth. He started with pickpocketing, then shoplifting, but he quickly turned to stealing cars, then scamming wealthy people. He assembled teams of thieves, forming a local group called the School of Turin. The other members of the team include Elio Donorio, aka the Genius, a specialist in alarm systems and an all-around electronics expert who can find a solution to the most complex alarm systems of any vault. There is also Ferdinando Finito, aka the Monster. Despite his tall stature and strength, he was nicknamed the Monster because he was excellent at everything he did. He was apparently an expert lockpicker, electrician, mechanic, and driver. In other words, a true jack of all trades. Another team member is Pietro Tavano, aka Speedy. He was added sometime later to the team by Notarbartolo himself. He was a skilled thief, but also a skittish paranoid man. He was actually Notarbartolo's lifelong friend. The others thought he would be a liability, but out of friendship and loyalty, Notarbartolo convinced the others to add him to the team, and later you will discover why they were right about Speedy being a problem. Finally, we have the King of Keys. There is no specific data about who he is, nor about his appearance. All we know is that he was an older man, described as one of the best key forgers in the world. He was quite composed and was also a gifted lockpicker too. Notarbartolo, being a tenant, abused his eloquent skills and charisma to ask the building manager for the floor plans under the pretext that he wanted to expand his business. Surprisingly enough, he even got the schematics for the vault room, which was a very big mistake, and something that goes to show that no matter how secure the vault is, human errors and vulnerabilities can be the biggest weakness. He also regularly visited the building, attempting to obtain more information while befriending the staff and guards using his charming personality. So, he easily gained access to more restricted areas like the surveillance room. There, he started having a better understanding of the guards' behavior, their routines, and how they monitor the cameras. But most importantly, he noticed something crucial. The vault was not physically observed by security staff at night, and this was a huge revelation for the team. Notarbartolo wasn't the only one looking for blind spots in the Diamond Center. The Genius, while walking around the district, found a building with a rear private garden that shares a portion of it with the Diamond Center, which was one of the areas not monitored by cameras at the time. And this will play a very important role in the beginning of the heist, as you will see. Also, one of the biggest problems the heist crew had to overcome is replicating the key of the vault. To do this, the genius disguised as a worker carried Notarbartolo's ID card and a fake work order, and he went to the Diamond Center building at night. But to get in, he convinced the evening shift guard that he had a job in Notarbartolo's office. He entered the building and, taking advantage of the fact that no one at the time was monitoring the surveillance cameras, he went down to the lower floor where the vault was located. He entered the vault and smoothly covered the cameras to avoid being recorded. Then he quickly placed a small camera on the ceiling. He positioned it so that an overhead light obscured it from the security camera's view, and in a way that made it almost invisible to the human eye when the lights were on. The video footage was broadcast to a nearby sensor hidden in a waterproof chamber inside a fully functional fire extinguisher, which Notarbartolo had already attached inside a storage room close enough to the vault. The next morning, the guards took the vault's key, inserted it, and put in the door's combination number. The heist team finally had the access codes, and the King of Keys had enough footage to create an exact copy of the key. Now let's pause for a moment. Replicating a complex key like the one used in the Diamond Center must be extremely hard. But doing that just by looking at it from a video footage is next to impossible. And in the next few minutes, we'll see if this is gonna work or not. Notarbartolo chose the day of the heist very carefully. You see, during the Proximus Diamond Games tennis tournament in Antwerp, a convoy of police cars escorted an armored truck through the heart of the district, and this truck belonged to De Beers, the world's largest diamond mining company. As the doors opened, the truck was surrounded by armed guards that dispersed on foot, and the boxes were swiftly taken inside the Diamond Center. At that moment, payday was decided, and the vault was full of diamonds and money. The team gathered at Notarbartolo's apartment, doing one last recap of the plan. On a side note, the monster went to a local store and bought food for the team, in addition to a salami sandwich, which will play a crucial role against them later on in the story. During the next 42 hours, they had to act swiftly and precisely, because they planned to do the whole operation in just 5 hours. Enter, steal, and run. Preparations were finished, but Notarbartolo had to do one last thing, which will make or break the whole thing. He had to make one last visit to the vault. Once inside, he swiftly took a can of women's hairspray inside his jacket's pocket, and with a quick movement he practiced, he covered the heat and motion sensors. The oily film would temporarily insulate the sensors, as it would only be triggered if it senses both heat and motion. But the question was, for how long would this trick work? With the test they already did, they calculated that they can get roughly 5 minutes inside the vault before the body heat would penetrate the oily film and trigger the alarms. But the atmospheric conditions inside the vault weren't equal to the ones inside the replica, so there is a good chance it would not last that long. Shortly before midnight, Notarbartolo's rented car, Peugeot 307, pulled up to the eastern side of the Diamond District. Speedy, the Master, the Genius, and the King of Keys hopped out of the car wearing rubber gloves and carrying large duffel bags. Notarbartolo remained in his car, carefully paying attention to his police scanner. Then, quickly the King of Keys picked the locks of an abandoned building office and they slipped inside. The Genius led them to the rear garden, where he had left a ladder from one of the previous nights. He used it to climb to a small balcony on the Diamond Center's second floor, and just moments before reaching it, he pulled out from his bag a huge homemade polyester shield. Then, he slowly and delicately approached the balcony before placing the shield directly in front of the alarm. After that, the Genius disabled the alarm connected to one of the balcony's windows and soon the four thieves found themselves inside the Diamond Center. Moments later, they made their way down through the stairways to the antechamber, and they covered the cameras with black plastic bags to avoid being detected. Then they flicked the lights on, and now finally, they found themselves face to face with the vault's door. Their 18 months of preparation was starting to finally pay off. But in hindsight, this was actually just the beginning. The genius pulled a custom-made slab of rigid aluminum out of his bag and used double-sided gaffer tape on one side. Then he stuck it on the two plates that made the magnetic field on the right side of the vault's door and unscrewed their bolts. The magnetic plates were now loose, but the sticky aluminum held them together, allowing the genius to pull them away and tape them to the antechamber's wall. The next step was to try the key the King of Keys made just from looking at the footage from the camera they planted inside the vault. But to their horror, the key did not work. The King of Keys, however, told the team, "I remember that while analyzing the footage, I noticed that the guard usually visited a utility room before opening the vault." So the King of Keys quickly lockpicked the room's door, and he was astonished because he found the original key inside. At that moment, they knew that fate was on their side. So he grabbed the key and slotted it in the keyhole while the genius put in the combination. A moment later, the genius nodded, and the monster quickly turned off the lights while the King of Keys turned the key and spun the handle. Everyone was nervous, but luckily the vault was unlocked. At the same time, Speedy ran up upstairs to get the signal to keep in touch with Notarbartolo, who was waiting anxiously in the car, surveying the police movements in total darkness. The King of Keys, on the other hand, flawlessly picked the lock of the steel gate. Then he stepped away, because it was now the monster's time to shine. He knew the hairspray keeping the motion sensors down wouldn't last long, so he had to move quickly. Just like he practiced, he walked 11 steps into the middle of the room, reached for the ceiling, and pushed back one of its panels. He found the security system's main wires, then he used wire strippers to tear away the plastic coating on the cables. One wrong move, and the wire would severely break the circuit, triggering the alarms. Once the copper wires were exposed, he clipped a new, pre-cut piece of wire between the inbound and outbound cables. As a consequence, the sensors were now rendered useless and it was safe to enter. You see, this was a real challenge for the team. If they made one tiny mistake or took too long, it could have triggered the alarm, pushing everything down the drain. Still, they were cautious. They blinded the detectors with a styrofoam box and covered the lie detectors with tape. So now, after all the sensors and detectors were basically deactivated, the King of Keys unloaded a homemade, hand-cracked drill. He forced its tip into the lock of each box, and then he started to drill until the latch snapped and the box popped open. And that was the moment they were waiting for. They filled duffel bags with jewels, international currencies, and leather satchels containing the diamonds. By 5:30 a.m., they have opened 109 boxes. But they didn't have much time left, so Speedy called Notarbartolo, "It is time to go." On their way out, they took the security tapes, then raced out of the building, jammed the bags in the car, slapped the door, and headed off on foot for Notarbartolo's apartment while he drove away in the car. Exhausted from working 2 days without sleeping, Notarbartolo and his friend Speedy left in the afternoon after they had some rest. They took the E19 motorway towards Brussels, while the rest of the team was already driving back to Italy. The team agreed on a rendezvous point outside Milan, but Speedy's paranoid personality started to take over. Notarbartolo told him to calm down. He told him that if he wanted, he would drop him at a train station in Brussels, but Speedy was against this idea, because he believed the city was already crawling with cops looking for them. They couldn't take that risk, so they had to drop their bags that contained their trash and every evidence that can lead to them immediately. Even though Notarbartolo was against this idea, he pulled off on the side of the highway and surveyed the surroundings and found a dirty lane leading into the forest. The dirt lane led him into a thick foliage. The site he found was hidden from the highway, and Notarbartolo told Speedy to stay put while he went out to scout the area. He passed by a rusty gate and found an abandoned shed beside a small pond, so he decided it was a good place to burn the evidence. As he was heading back to the car, he was completely horrified as he watched Speedy throwing the bag's contents around in a chaotic frenzy. Speedy was clearly freaking out. You see, generally, behavior like this can be disastrous in any heist, so Notarbartolo was livid. He knew it would take hours to gather everything, so he tried to stomp whatever he could under the mud. Then he angrily ordered Speedy to get into the car. They abandoned the spot immediately after that, and hopefully, by the time someone would stumble across the trash, it will have deteriorated and everything was taken care of. Or so they thought. August Van Camp, a 59-year-old retired Belgian grocer, had a problem, and that is, people often dump trash in his land. Monday, February 17th, Van Camp decided to check his parcels again, and he was fuming with rage as he watched his pretty forest trashed. While passing through the videotapes and a wine bottle resting near a half-eaten salami sandwich, he quickly grabbed whatever evidence he could to describe the mess to the cops. Once again, he was complaining to the police who were listening to him, but as he mentioned envelopes printed with the words Diamond Center, the officer inquisitively told him to stay on site until they arrived. Shortly after, dozens of police officers were carefully combing the forest, collecting the garbage and the errant diamonds. One policeman found a pile of torn paper. The clue seemed promising, because it was an invoice for a low-light video surveillance system, and the buyer was Leonardo Notarbartolo. And that was the start of the thread that will give the investigators the upper hand and lead to the robbers. Or was it? Back at Van Camp's property, another detective peered at a small, jagged piece of paper poking out of the mud. It was a business card that had the address and phone number of Elio Donorio. On the other side, surprisingly enough, Notarbartolo decided to go back to Antwerp. At this moment, you might be thinking to yourself, did he lose his mind? Well, his car rental was due the next day, and he had to show his face to the Diamond Center to erase any suspicions. In addition, he wanted to clean his apartment more thoroughly. Notarbartolo then went to the Diamond Center while his friend was waiting outside. He waved at the security guard, who instantly recognized him and went to collect his mail. Soon, detectives rushed into the building. They found Notarbartolo chatting with the building's manager. While questioning him, the friend took off as Notarbartolo stalled for time, pretending to have trouble understanding. The police asked Notarbartolo for the location of his apartment, but he claimed that he couldn't remember the exact address of his own apartment. He just knew how to walk there. You see, he did that for a reason. As they approached the building, they found Notarbartolo's wife and their friends stepping out of the building. They were coming down loaded with bags that contained critical evidence. Notarbartolo's tactic of wasting time could have paid off, but unfortunately for him, it was not enough. Investigators found a series of prepaid SIM cards that were linked to cell phones used almost exclusively to call three persons: Elio Donorio the genius, Fernando Finito the monster, and Pietro Travano aka Speedy. The day Notarbartolo was arrested, Italian police broke open the safe at his home in Turin. They found 17 polished diamonds attached to certificates that the Belgian diamond detectives traced back to the vault. Investigators also found a half-eaten salami sandwich. They found an antipasto Italiano salami packaging nearby, and sent it to the Diamond Squad headquarters. Few days later, detectives got a search warrant for Notarbartolo's apartment. In a cuphead, they found a receipt from a local grocery store for antipasto Italiano salami. The receipt had a timestamp. A detective drove to the grocery store and asked the manager to rewind his camera footage to 12:56 p.m. on Thursday, February 13th. When the video came to a halt and snapped into focus, there was an image of a tall, muscular Italian guy purchasing a salami sandwich. His name, Ferdinando Finito, also known as the Monster. With the cell phone records and the salami sandwich evidence, the Belgian detectives persuaded French police to raid the home of the Monster's girlfriend, which was located at the French Riviera. They retrieved marked $100 bills that the detectives say belonged to one of the Diamond Center victims. The Monster was later arrested after some long procedures in Italy in November 2007, serving a 5-year sentence. When questioned by the police, the genius denied any involvement in the heist, but his DNA was found on some adhesive tape left in the vault. He was extradited to Belgium in November 2007 to begin also a 5-year sentence. Speedy, the friend of Notarbartolo, as a consequence of being involved in the heist, received a similar sentence of 5 years. And as you might expect, Notarbartolo was found guilty, and he was sentenced to the longest sentence of 10 years in prison. One man only has been able to escape, though they found cell phone records and DNA traces of the King of Keys, who successfully escaped, but they failed to identify him. Most of the diamonds and jewelry were never found till this day. Now the question is, did the thieves actually steal $100 million worth of jewelry? Or was it just $20 million as Notarbartolo insisted in the trial? Also, did he actually invent the story of the dealer? And was this record-breaking heist only a masquerade hiding one of the biggest insurance scams? Some say they were only waiting for their sentences to end while their shares awaited them hidden somewhere in the foothills of the Italian Alps.